Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new to my channel, we have these live streams regularly for an open space for the community and more in-depth talk and analysis. I also post videos regularly. If you prefer short-form videos, you can go ahead to my video tab, where you will find recent updates that are several minutes long usually. I posted two videos earlier on, one of them about a report in Israel, in Tel Aviv, that there was an explosion there. We had updates on that saying that it was indeed something to do with security, it's not something criminal, at least in accordance to Israeli sources. And I posted another video about Hezbollah drone going and taking pictures of Benjamin Netanyahu's house in Caesarea. Israeli fighter jets were deployed, and then they said, no, it's an object. It's an object. It's not a. It's an object or a bird, right? It wasn't a drone. However, the initial report said there was a drone, and then it went back to Lebanon. But they probably don't want to admit that they have been infiltrated to such high levels. Also, we had significant action coming from the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, attacking the Netzarim line, and Hezbollah is continuing their daily attacks, not yet responding to the assassination. Everyone is waiting for that response from Iran, Hezbollah, Yemen, and Iraq. What I wanted to talk to you about in this video is an attack from the Iraqi resistance on the Golan Heights and the statement that they made in relation to the US bases in Iraq. But before I go to that, Hamas, they were armed wing, they attacked the Netzarim line. Netzarim line is a main issue for Israel. They don't want to withdraw. It's one of the main obstacles. And they also don't want to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. However, it appears that some people are selling false hopes. And again, not to be pessimistic or optimistic here, but the vibes of the negotiations are labeled as optimistic, primarily from the Biden administration. They are talking a lot about optimism, although there haven't been any breakthrough. We heard a report from Egypt very recently in the last hour that Israel showed no objection to withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor. And some Arab networks are viewing this as something positive, as a wow, as a breakthrough. However, there is nothing to signal that there has been a breakthrough. The fact that a country does not show an objection does not mean acceptance. Secondly, Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to have another move where he will hinder everything. How? By delaying the talk. Now he is requesting to delay the talk about the withdrawal from the Netzarim line and from the Philadelphia corridor and Rafah crossing, of course. That's the most southern part of Gaza, the borders between Egypt and Gaza, or the Egyptian and Gazan Rafah. There's a Rafah in Gaza and a Rafah in Egypt. And delay the talk up until later on. Well, firstly, Netanyahu himself declared many times, we will not be withdrawing. Okay, of course he can do a U-turn. But up until very recently, he said, we're not going to withdraw. We're not withdrawing. Even the statement that came from the Israeli army yesterday, that was reported on the Israeli Broadcasting Authority, saying that Israel said the military actions in Gaza have ended, and we reported that to the military establishment, to the political establishment, but we can go back to fighting in Gaza as and when new intelligence pops up and we need to carry out a certain operation. Even that doesn't signal that they are withdrawing. Why? Because they're bound by who? By Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister. He is the one calling the shots. What Netanyahu is trying to do here is increase the time of negotiations. All of what's happening now is to Netanyahu's plan of delaying this further and further and having an open war with Gaza and normalizing the genocide in Gaza as a new status quo. Why? Because he knows Hamas are not going to take a step back when it comes to the thick lines in Gaza. And he is not willing to give in, because it's not just about him. It's also about the people applying pressure on him from his government. So everything is going to his plan in delaying this. How? Firstly, the United States administration, they're saying we're applying pressure, but they're sending him tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions, in weapons of mass destruction that they brutalize innocent people in with their genocide in Gaza and barbarism. And he's sending him money. And although we had this UN resolution, the United States is taking no step to implement the United States Security Council resolution. How comes? You proposed it. They tried to do it as a pressure, but that doesn't work. If the money goes and if the weapons go, that doesn't work. And again, Benjamin Netanyahu, to him, okay, fine, it's a trade. You're going to send me tens of billions and the military equipment and whatever I need. And you want me in return to go to these theater negotiations. Fine, I'll go to the theater negotiations and you give me millions and I will continue to delay. That's why he's trying to delay the talk about the Netzarim line and the Philadelphia corridor. Everyone knows his tricks by now. But the first people who know his tricks are, number one, the Israelis. The Israeli population who are protesting against him, and his colleagues, the negotiating delegation. We had leaks from the negotiating delegation over half a year ago, saying that by the way things are going and by Netanyahu's behavior in adding more conditions whenever we are about to reach a deal, it looks like we will be negotiating for 1 year. So they've had all of this time now, half a year after that report. And who knows, we could reach a year with the negotiations. And again, the main contributing factor here is the United States administration support for Israel and its continuation of the genocide. No one can say about pressure when you still support this criminal entity, this terrorist entity, with arms, with whatever they need to continue a genocide as labeled by the world's largest court. And you have criminals, depraved criminals, running the country. So all of it is talk. It seems like, as we spoke yesterday, both Iran and the resistance are understanding this game. Not just Hamas, but Hezbollah too, and Yemen. From the statements that we heard from them, Hezbollah, many times they say the United States is Israel. They are complicit with Israel, and they're the same thing. And they enable them. Likewise with Hamas, who did not participate in the negotiations and who said that Netanyahu always does the same thing. So from our perspective, if you're not going to put something on the table that's in line with what we accepted recently or viewed positively, which is the Biden declaration and the United Nations Security Council resolution, then we're not interested. And again, the fact that they went and met without Hamas shows you that they're doing it to buy time. They're doing it to buy time, because if it wasn't the situation and the tension that we're having now, this pending response, then Israel would have used this as a great excuse not to show up to these negotiations. All of them understand the resistance fronts, what Israel is doing, and Iraq is understanding what Israel is doing. Today, they attacked the Golan Heights. Iraq attacked the Golan Heights in an attack that they implemented on their own. We've had a couple of coordinated attacks between them and Ansarullah in Yemen. However, this attack came from them, and they had a statement. And in their statement, they mentioned interesting things when it comes to the United States presence in Iraq and what we're about to see if this situation continues. Before I go, and this is what I wanted, the main thing that I wanted to share with you, and then I'll of course open the space up for the community for participation. But before I share this with you, and in case you don't know, the situation both in Iraq and in Syria has been escalating. There was an understanding that took place between Iran and the United States administration back in January, following several months of attack from Iraq on US bases in Iraq and in Syria, that we will take the US bases out of the equation, so long as there is no extension of something. Clearly, Iran wanted something in return. Is it a confirmation from the United States that they will not be taking an active role in an Israeli attack on them? Maybe. And we've seen that. So that could have been something. Iran telling the US, okay, if you don't want us to attack your bases in Iraq, firstly, we will continue attacking. Well, not us, the resistance movements in Iraq, of course, coordinated with Iran, but they will continue attacking Israel. But they won't attack your bases in Iraq if you can confirm to me, US administration, you won't be attacking Iran. That could have been. That's, again, an assumption. That's not like something that we heard. I think that could have been something, or any other request that could come from Iran in Iraq, anything to do with their interests. This agreement has been fading away with time. Firstly, we've had a couple of attacks on Ain al-Assad base, and we had an attack on a couple of bases in Syria. We've had US withdrawal from Al-Umar and from another base in Syria, one of them in oil, in relation to oil, and another one is another base in Syria. And Iraq are now increasing the tone and telling the United States, if you want to continue down this path, it's going to be all out on all of your bases. So in a statement by the resistance, they said that the Golan attack comes within the framework of its continuation of its resistance approach and in support of the people of Palestine, children, women, and the elderly. The resistance also confirmed in its statement the continuation of operations to destroy strong enemy strongholds at an increasing pace. At the end of July, the resistance targeted a vital target in the occupation using a drone north of the occupied Palestinian city al-Rashrash, or Eilat in Hebrew. They call it. The Iraqi Resistance Coordination Committee also warned last Monday that it is not bound, quote, not bound by any restrictions if, quote, the American occupation forces get involved again in targeting the people of Iraq or exploit its airspace to carry out attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran, stressing that its response then will not be limited to any ceilings. So, firstly, the tone is shifting. Secondly, they're already preparing them from a potential move being carried out from Iraqi territory or airspace against Iran. Against Iran. Although we haven't had a confirmation from the United States that they will be joining Israel in a potential attack on Iran if or when Iran responds. However, Iraq are already telling them that this is what's going to happen. There will be no boundaries, no restrictions, and the responses will not be limited by any ceilings, meaning it could be an all-out on all of your bases in Iraq or in the region too. They haven't, by the way, restricted that response to Iraq. And you can understand that from the word will not be limited to ceilings, restrictions, or being bound by anything. They continued, these are just the last couple statements, and I'll wrap it up and open the space up for your participation. They said, with the continued persistence of the forces of arrogance in their brutal and treacherous attacks against the people and the resistance men, these actions are coming alongside these actions from the opposing side, these forces continue to sponsor and support the security of the Zionist entity at the expense of the security of the region, without regard to the sovereignty of Iraq or the countries that reject its criminal policies. They ended it there. Again, we understand that this agreement that Iran had with the United States, again, reported agreement, it wasn't like anything public, but there were reports based on people who are, dealing with both sides, that there was an understanding. And indeed, we saw the declaration at the time from Iraq that we will no longer be attacking US bases. However, clearly that's shifting. And all of that is shifting for the sake of Israel. By the way, this is what people need to remember here. The United States, they're paying the price for the sake of Israel. It's for their own complicity in enabling this genocide and putting themselves in the position of the worst party involved in all of this. The worst party involved in everything is the United States administration. Let no one be delusional. It's not Israel. Israel is pure evil. We know that. We know what they're doing. And of course, they're implementing it. But the United States enables this by this ongoing support. Israel is nothing without the United States administration support. Nothing. Zero. Without the political cover, without the diplomatic cover, without the military assistance, without the billions, without the arm, they're nothing. What are they? A couple of things. Even their military industrial complex relies heavily on the United States administration. So clearly, we have a threat, a warning coming from Iraq, telling the United States here, listen, don't dare use any of the territories here in case Israel wants to retaliate. And again, to elaborate here, the delay primarily from Iran and from the resistance force is coming because they know that this will most likely be all out after this response. Why? Because they will be attacking in a very heavy manner, and Israel will most likely respond to that. That will lead to certain exchanges being done. Although, Iran can attack and say, from our perspective, matter sorted, right? But Netanyahu, he said, no, we will respond, and gallant, and respond with something stronger, double the force or much stronger, fierce that they never felt before. And they're threatening Lebanon with weapons that they've never used before. And to be in a position where they can protect themselves as much as possible, they must first make sure that they have all of the weapons, all of the equipment, all of the surveillance required to carry out the attack and to defend themselves, and have access to any potentially large weapons not used before against this aggression. Although Israel is trying to have this coalition support in attacking Iran, that so far from what we're seeing is failing. The United States did not participate in attacking neither Hezbollah nor Iran, nor they just did the genocide coalition. And that's also to do not just with Israel, but from their perspective, their trade with Israel, because they didn't want to lift their trade with Israel. And to them, they didn't want Yemen to dictate what they're doing. Again, you're on the wrong side of history, but there's more than Israel to that. But when it comes to Iran, they haven't succeeded. And the United States, they many times said that we will not be participating in attack against Iran. The German government, they said it's unlikely that we will have boots on ground. And we had no confirmation from France and from the UK that they will be participating in attacking Iran. As a matter of fact, I heard the report criticizing the assumption of the Israeli foreign minister Israel Katz when he met the British and French foreign ministers, saying that we expect you to participate. We expect you to participate when we attack Iran. Again, hinting that they do have an intent to go out on Iran if they do, or when they do have this retaliation. This is what I wanted to share with you. And let me open the space up for all of you. Thank you so much again for everyone who's tuning in, everyone who's waiting, all of the members and subscribers and community viewers from all across the world. Let me start with thanking everyone who just sent super. Studio Rainer, thank you so much for your super. Walid B and Mingla and Samir, thank you so much for your super thanks. Let me start off with Studio Rainer. How connected do you think Ukraine and Israel are tied? I strongly believe if Ukraine war ends, then Russia will be able to enter the Middle East with the strongest army in the world and end the petrodollar for good. Well, thank you firstly for that. Again, Studio Rainer. And I think there is a level of connection. Firstly, many of the Israeli leaders and many of the Israeli population are descendants of Ukrainians. Most of them are Jewish populations of Khazaria who embraced Zionism and immigrated to Palestine, stole people's land, participated in expelling the population and the ethnic cleansing of 48. Many of them changed their names. Now, with regards to, there's this historical tie. With regards to the tie politically, Israel is very careful in military ties with Ukraine because they know Russia has a lot of leverage in the region. Russia has been increasing its ties with not only Syria, they're based there, but with Iran and Hezbollah. But the biggest thing is their ties with Iran. And I think you said, I strongly believe the Ukraine war ends, then Russia will be able to enter the Middle East. I think the war in Ukraine actually made the bond stronger between Russia and Iran primarily, and the other resistance movements, mainly Hezbollah, because of their geographic connection with Syria, where Russia holds the base of Tartus, now another joint base with Iran. And we had many reports that they had coordinated drills with Hezbollah's participation. So that bond came to grow and become tighter after the war in Ukraine, because the war in Ukraine proved to be the ultimate representation of the United States' attempt to go and continue and occupy Russia. They want Russia as a country. Let no one be delusional here. It's not about supporting the Ukrainian people. I know, they say that, and you can criticize that and the double standards and hypocrisy, fine. But it's not about the Ukrainian people. It's about them having an interest in Russia. They took that as an excuse. Russia probably had a preemptive attack, and they have the regions that they have a conflict with the Ukraine in. But this was following a pattern of decades of expansion east, in contradiction to what they had with the agreement they had with Russia in the 90s. But then what happened? China realized that, Iran realized that. Iran was one of the first countries to support Russia with weapons in Ukraine. Why? Because they want Russian weapons too. They are growing this bond, and they are seeing that if a country as big as Russia is going to be taken over, for example, by NATO or by the US, or something happens to them, that's weakening our front. So what's happening in Ukraine, China supports Russia, North Korea supports Russia, Iran supports Russia, and many other countries do. These are the most significant countries that are always, in the limelight. China is trying to have it under the radar as much as possible. They're trying to have North Korean involvement as a front, right? Because the North Korea is the axe of China at the end of the day. And again, this whole thing strengthened this bond. Now, you're saying again, they will be able to enter the Middle East with the strongest army in the world and end the petrodollar for good. That wouldn't have necessarily happened if there was no war in Ukraine. Why? Because Russia had good ties with Israel, and they had coordination with Israel. They had a couple of ups and downs. Netanyahu used to visit Russia regularly, and some of his ministers had good ties with Putin and the administration. But that relationship started to decline bit by bit. And with Israel's reluctance in supporting Russia, by the way, because Russia wanted them to support them. And Ukraine wanted Israel to support them. Ukraine, Israel ended up having a better understanding to a level where Zelensky himself, the hypocrite, the grand hypocrite, he calls Hamas terrorists and he supports Israel. What a hypocrite! What a shameful hypocrite! You're supposedly fighting an occupation and you support a genocidal entity. So it shows you the level of hypocrisy and lies. So I think that started a big shift towards ending the unilateral position of the United States. What Gaza has done is given it steroids. And I think whether or not it ends with Ukraine, they're trying to keep Russia busy with Kursk now. That's not a Ukrainian move. That's an American move to apply pressure on Russia. It's not like the Ukrainian government, they have like a lot of independence or whatever. Hey, the people who support them, who supports you, who has the money, that's how it happened. So I think it's changing anyway. However, and again, thank you so much, Studio, for your super. And let's check the next one. Mingla saying the US bases are sitting ducks in the Middle East, totally. And that's what the Iraqi resistance is reiterating to them with this recent statement. And it doesn't look like the United States is taking a step back, by the way. The United States is increasing. And Iran and the resistance fronts know that it's a contributor. It's not someone who's, a genuine mediator. They are biased and they are complicit. And Wali, thank you so much again, my brother. And also Samir, thank you so much and greetings to both of you. Okay. Let's see where we're at. Bill, I think the Zion Center will go out big bang, destroying the global oil market and world economy. Eurasia and Africa will recover first, and the era of empires will be over. I think the era of the empire is ending, and instead of, again, using it rationally, they are continuing with the arrogant approach, the arrogant, harmful approach. They talk about, national security and, global security and threat security. They are the cause of lack of global security. Who the United States administration and its little puppet regimes in Europe, and of course Israel, they are the cause of destabilization. What? And then they go and complain about people who resist them and stand up for them. What do you expect people to tell you, do whatever the hell you want to do? So it's ending sooner or later, but I think with how quickly things are shifting, and again, even when we talk about like 10 months of genocide, 2 years of the war in Ukraine, this is not a very long time if you calculate it based on, firstly, our lifespan, and secondly, changes that we have seen throughout history, many political changes or revolutions or, national independence, it can take over 100 years, So it's not something that happens, but 1-2 years, look at all of the significant shift that's happening. This is not something, easy, and it's happening relatively quickly. Okay. The Badger. Assalamu alaikum, Mahmoud. Wa alaikum assalam, brother. Thank you. What is Israel exactly relying on when it comes to surviving in conflict with Iran more than 3 days? How don't they expect to be teleported back to good old 1000 BC? They are relying on this defense. Israel behaves like a little spoilt, rude child, used to being pampered and giving everything they want. And they were giving everything they want from the US administration. US gives them whatever they want, so they continue to act like a bully and a brat. And an ungrateful brat as well. It's not like they're thankful. No, they're an ungrateful, little spoilt brat of Western countries in general. Because UK started this. The Balfour Declaration, but after the fall of the empire, the new empire came, the US, and they took the patron role of Israel. So they're used to being spoiled. They think they'll be defended. And again, when you're talking about a country with people and a leadership that is so supremacist and arrogant, a lot of ignorance comes with that too. Arrogance and ignorance are tied together, and it blindens them. Their hate, their ignorance, their arrogance, these things blinded them to a level where they hinder their thought process. So if you look at it from any reasonable perspective, right, and you start to question, look, what have you done militarily, politically, diplomatically to further strengthen your position globally? Nothing. They've done the contrary. They've done the Palestine campaign, what no one did in history. By their actions, by simply being them, not hiding anything, not brushing anything under the carpet, and persisting in the same genocidal approach. And again, with the response in Iran, you could be talking about a response, a big response, and Israel will then do something in return that it will not declare to not attract further retaliation. However, Israel did not declare that they killed Ismail Haniyeh. Israel did not declare that they killed Ismail Haniyeh. They declared that they killed Fuad Shukr, and they didn't declare that they target Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran because they were scared of the Iranian response. So, and again, it's malicious. It's, the United States would have had a bit of a different tone, maybe. We already had reports, on the day that the White House didn't really like what's happening and what have you. But again, the United States administration, all talk, no action. The Phil guy saying, Salam Mahmoud, how popular is the resistance front in Iraq? Can Iran use the airspace of Iraq and Syria as part of their military response? They have a level of popularity, and of course, like with any movement, not everyone supports them. So you'll have people disagreeing with them, like people disagree with other movements too. But they have a level of popularity. They have, of course, a level of power. Can Iran use the airspace of Iraq and Syria as part of their military response? They can, technically, but I don't think they will, unless things escalate and the other side starts using other airspaces to attack Iran. Now, would they use it for defense? That's an interesting thing. Probably, because why? From Iran's perspective, their enemy, they used other countries to help with defense. They used Jordan. The UK helped them in Jordan. And the Jordanian government, of course, the US, reports of Saudi and UAE defense potentially as well. So that could be used for this. But when it comes to attack, not necessarily, because again, from the attack perspective, that will be the movements in that region. So Iran doesn't have to say, I attacked you from Iraq. The resistance attacked you from Iraq, not us, because they have a reason to attack Israel. Everyone has a reason to attack Israel, by the way, all of the world, in case you don't know. All the thing you need to go read some UN resolutions and international law and how you have the right to have a counterattack or preemptive strike on a country that's reckless, that's a terrorist country committing crimes against humanity and is at risk of escalating everything. You see, this is what the US and NATO use constantly on every country that they don't like. But the other side, that's the problem. They don't use these things. Gully Burke, thank you for your super. He said, what is your take on Butcher Blinken meeting Netanyahu tomorrow? Things always escalate when they meet. Well, the relationship between Blinken and Netanyahu deteriorated. Likewise, when they started meeting afterwards, and especially after Blinken tried to meet with the chief of staff in Israel, Herzl Halevi, without the consent of the Netanyahu government. The Netanyahu government saw that as a potential coup attempt, and the government started saying things like, how dare he? How can he try and go and meet the chief of staff? You are a political level. You need to have political level representation. What are you doing going to meet the army chief of Israel? And again, could the United States have been trying to do something with other figures in Israel? We saw them preferring Benny Gantz, for example. Benny Gantz went on an unauthorized visit to the United States that Netanyahu refused, and he did not fund it. As a matter of fact, now he's asking for a refund for something from him, and he ordered the Israeli embassy in the United States not to welcome Benny Gantz. So there have been moves from the US administration to empower other figures in Israel, not to a level of a military coup. Were they trying a soft coup? Maybe. But Netanyahu is a very stubborn man. And he still has support in Israel. He still has people who support him. So they will most likely, again, tell you that, look, we tried to apply pressure. He's going to come and tell him, look, we're potentially going to cancel out the Iran response if you agree on it by, I don't know, Thursday when we meet in Cairo, whichever day it is. But if you don't, then Iran might attack you, you know, and we might not be able to defend you the way we did before all of this talk. But clearly that hasn't worked on Netanyahu before. Why should it work again on him? Why should it work again on him? He did not submit to higher pressure before. And we have no indication that the United States is applying any genuine pressure on Israel. The United States is as complicit and is even worse than Israel when it comes to Gaza. And Omar Ali, why doesn't Hamas have tunnels for civilians? They could have built some separate ones for women and children over the past 10 years. Well, firstly, what's their tunnel system? Number one, the tunnel system you're talking about generally, it's a sophisticated tunnel system in terms of length and network and whatever, but it's done for military use in general inside of Gaza. With regards to other tunnels, like the tunnel system that they had, still have between them and Egypt, that tunnel was used for consumer goods in general. Why? Because Gaza was under a blockade. They needed food. And the situation at the time, and I'm talking several years back, but then they started to open the Rafah crossing more regularly. They started to have more aid over the ground from Egypt. They, in terms of having this system inside of Gaza, they don't have the capacity to have tunnel systems that will contain the whole population. They don't have the capacity to do that. Even if they did, it's questionable how many people would have survived with the type and level of bombs that Israel detonates. Israel would have buried them under the ground anyway. Because when you're talking about a half a ton bomb, firstly, usually when you talk about bunkers, for example, 10 meters right under the ground. Israel bunker busters that go 30 meters down below the ground and cause so much destruction that will bury the people inside it. And the main question and main thing that we should be raising here is how this entity, this Zionist entity, is being enabled to conduct such actions, whether or not the Palestinians have or don't have tunnels. And thank you again for your question. Jack, my father used to say, what's taken by force has to be returned by force. That's the only thing that Israel knows. When you retaliate, strong things settle down with them. All of a sudden, peace in play. Yeah, well, I mean, look, that's of course normal. That's a human nature. That's a human law. That's divine law. That's international law for you. That's basic. And the world, again, it's not a world that's run by morals or values. It's a world run by force. Although the biggest culprits talk about, human rights and democracy and whatever, but they implement their will by force, by brutal force, by mass genocides. Okay. And with regards to Israel, well, they've proved it historically, haven't they? Israel proved time after time that they only understand the language of force. Firstly, do you know that Israel did not submit official maps to the United Nations? Why? Because to them, their map ends with the foot of their last soldier. That's what Ben Gurion said. This is Israel, a neo-colonialist, supremacist, terrorist, expansionist entity, right? Look at them. They occupied Sinai. They used to consider Sinai the place. No, the fate of Sinai is like the fate of Tel Aviv. They withdrew. When? After war with Egypt. They were in Beirut. How were they expelled? Slowly from Lebanon. Resistance, right? Gaza, how did they withdraw before? Resistance. What does that tell you? We are a criminal expansionist entity, and we don't understand talk. We don't understand in common human language. And again, their level of barbarism proves that. So of course, they proved their track record of only conceding when they're met with force. And again, instead of what? Instead of digging, instead of looking to the root cause of the problem, instead of putting everything into context, instead of addressing contemporary and historical injustices, especially with the Palestinian people, right? Instead, no, they'll go on the denial, right? No, are no Palestinian people. Secondly, no way, we're not conceding. And they'll continue down the same path. And chocolate pudding, thank you so much for your super, much appreciated. Said the fact that the world allowed this to happen, children, we're still talking about threats, is crazy. Yeah, totally. They're still talking about, no, they're going to Iran telling them don't escalate, right? Don't escalate. Please. Oh, don't hinder the peace. One of them told them, don't hinder the peace. Okay, let's go to your next participation. Nikki saying not just force, but they also respond to money sanctions. Well, the money and sanctions part of it, at least from the international political entities, that hasn't been something that they enforced on Israel. They banned Russia from the Olympics. After Russia waged a war in Ukraine, within less than a month, they already had a UN Security Council resolution. They already took them to the ICJ. Sanctions on Russia, sanctions on anyone linked with Russia, and even enabling hate speech against Russian people on platforms like Meta. But no, on Israel, none of that happened. The actions are individual actions. And again, even the calls from the EU now, Borrell, he was talking about, we need to talk about certain sanctions on some of these settlers. What do you mean on some of these settlers? Who enables the settlers? Every government in Israel enabled settlers. Israel itself is a big settlement, squatting establishment. What are they? What are they? So it's absurd. And again, they're trying to, throw sands in the eyes of the people. Oh yeah, we will sanction a couple of settlers, they are hand in hand with the army. And who controls the army? The state. Who runs it? The prime minister. What are we talking about? So nothing happened at a UN level, for example. The only thing that we saw is individual countries taking actions respectively to have certain sanctions on Israel or an arms embargo. And in some cases, they even had a backdoor for them. And the virus, thank you so much for your super, much appreciated. Vladimir Putin is saying, hi Mahmoud, why is the Iraqi government so weak? It is restraining Hashd al-Shabi from expelling US troops. No, they're not restraining them. They are coordinating with them. Okay, and secondly, when you talk about Al-Hashd al-Shabi or the Popular Mobilization Forces, they are, at the end of the day, they claim that they are bound by Iraq and the Iraqi government. The top figures in that movement go and meet the defense minister on a regular basis and meet officials in the government. However, they understand that the presence of the United States in Iraq is something that is agreed upon with the Iraqi government. So the big questions should be raised to the Iraqi government. Look, why are they still here 15 months after the massive withdrawal started, for example? Well, what are the returns? Like, if you read into it, you will hear that, you know, the United States is not sure. Again, shows you a lack of vision for the future sometimes from the US administration even, right? It's not just Netanyahu not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. We know that they have a general strategy when it comes to the Pentagon, but with regards to certain bases, for example, when they know that they're so vulnerable. Oh, you know, if we withdraw from here, we might have to withdraw from Syria, and, you know, we don't want to take all of them out at the same time and what have you. But what's for sure is that there's a pattern. Look, it's coming, right? And will they have a certain agreement later on or what have you? That's different. But so far, that's the funny thing here is that these bases are being used as leverage against them. Why? Even against Iran. Like, okay, Iran tell you, well, you're all over the place here. What do you mean? I'll launch a couple of ballistic missiles on some of your bases and get the story over and done with. Mahib, why is the USA, UK, Europe relentlessly supporting Israel even at their own demise? Well, it's because the lobby that supports Israel is bigger than Israel itself. So even when you talk about the Zionist lobby, for example, that's connected with other lobbies that work in the shadows. You're talking about a lobby with a majority of followers outside of Israel, outside of the state of Israel. And these people, they share the same values and the same vision. So when you talk about Israel and you talk about Israel and say you're a neo-colonialist state, you're a genocidal entity, you're a terrorist state, the people who support them share the same vision. That's why we call them the genocide cartel. And look at them. Look at some of these countries. Look at their history. What, the US? Start with the Native Americans. How many did you kill? 100 million. Of mass genocides. What? Other European countries? Where do you want to start? The UK? The British Empire? France and Algeria? British Empire all across the world? Where should we go? Tens of millions, like nothing. They used to kill people like flies. The official death toll in Gaza is 40,000. One day they used to kill 40,000. The US, 2 nuclear bombs, 250,000. Do you understand? So that mentality exists with certain figures in the establishment. Okay? However, it's becoming more and more untenable. It's becoming more and more untenable. And the funny thing is that they're trying to give them excuses. And going on the people who take action. What do you mean? People who take action against a genocidal entity are noble people, are people of honor, are brave people. Why are you going out against them? Because they share the same view with Israel. However, They know that, and they're preparing, in my opinion, for the day after Israel. Even when it comes to certain tones, even if it comes to certain policies, they know it's an inevitably dying entity, right? Fascism doesn't work. Fascism doesn't work. Israel is worse than fascism, right? A supremacist entity based on racial discrimination, it does not work. Simply proved its failure previously. Doesn't give you long-term stability. It might be short-lived, it might succeed for a certain period of time, but there's so much you can sell it to the people in the long run, especially nowadays when everyone has access to research tools. Okay, I'm not saying the truth, right? Because the truth is far bigger than anyone speaking here and there, but at least research tools, social media, independent media, sources that are not traditional, that are not controlled by central government. Everyone can see what's happening, and it's more difficult to defend abhorrent ideologies with this climate. It used to be easy to do that in the early 20th century and in history in general. Hell, 10, 20 years ago was a bit more easy to do that. But now it's different. Now it's different. And with regards to their own demise type thing, that's something very interesting, because if you look at the US primarily, this is why the US administration is so hated across the world, because people always link them with Israel. It's like they tied their fate with them, even though they don't have, this is the interesting thing. They don't even have a defense pact together. You know that? The US and Israel. Although the US offered Israel a defense pact. Why? Because Israel wanted to be at liberty from the US even. But they still support them. They still support them, and they still have, and still enable and allow such a criminal lobby, such a large criminal lobby that corrupts politics and undermines democracy. They operate freely. Really. Kate. It has drones spy on Milikovsky residence. Any damage? It looks like they did. No damage. No reports of damage. Looks like a surveillance strip. Again, Hezbollah didn't confirm. Israel later denied, although initially they said there has been an intrusion. But afterwards, to try and cover it up, they said we deployed some of our fighter jets. However, we could not identify a drone. It might have been another flying item or a bird. This is what Israel said. Chris, despite trillions in debt, US can still pump the money to support Israel in Ukraine, but are we fooled into thinking they have reached their limit? Well, they're still supporting them. Look, they're still supporting them. And the funny thing is that these countries, they have money for criminal wars across the world. They can spend trillions on criminal wars, killing infanticide, like what's happening in Gaza. Infanticide, it's a genocide. It's the biggest and most barbaric armed conflict of the 21st century, and they're still pumping money into it. When their own population is suffering, when many Americans are homeless and are in the streets, when many people don't have health insurance, right? They still find the money for wars and for nuclear weapons, nuclear programs. But they will cut on the basic things. They will have cuts, financial cuts, for basic stuff. Look, some of the austerity plans that you had in European countries, in UK and other countries, the United States, not even health insurance, right? Trump even overturned Obamacare in his period, right? Even though that was very limited too. So, but they have all of this money to spend. There's a money tree. But they use it for all of the purposes, for all the wrong purposes. Rand online, I was reading a book on the genocide of Native Americans, and I had to take breaks from reading it because of all of the horrible things that were done to them. Of course. You know, some reports say 100 million. And now Trump, what is he saying? Oh, he wants to deport people. Deport who? Native Americans don't look like you, Trump. They don't look like you. You're all immigrants. What are you talking about? That's the funny thing here. They come up with this national and, you know, it's like you're the immigrant. Cut the nonsense, right? Nations immigrated all across the globe. Instead of viewing it as something positive and something normal that human beings do, they travel from one place to another, they enrich each other, they do this and that. No, they'll tell you, no, I'm the super race. I am the worldly class race, right? And a superior race, and the others are below me, you know. Their languages are wrong, they don't understand anything, and, you know, I want to enlighten them. This is what colonialists did, right? And for multiple countries, not just the US. Yvonne is saying Ireland fought the British Empire for 800 years and died in our millions. Again, that's, you know, that's the thing I tell people sometimes about this example. And I also give this example when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. The talk about beyond the they are at war, for example, with the Muslims or Middle Easterners or what have you. The example of Britain and Ireland, right? And how Britain used to treat the Irish people. And the fact that you're talking about white people in general, Christian, okay, there's a level of the Church of England, Catholicism, but look at Ukraine and Russia now as well. White, Christian, and many of them Orthodox, by the way. But they're still, what is it for, right? It's the arrogant approach, entitled approach of I want to control everything, right? In many cases, they will start labeling it as other stuff too, but it happens all across the world. And like it ended with Ireland, you know, there might be a couple of things here and there. It will end in other places too. And how did it end? How did it end, like with Ireland too? You had years of resistance, armed resistance. How did it end with South Africa? Armed resistance. Nelson Mandela, he was heading armed resistance, wasn't he? He was labeled as a terrorist by the British government and Thatcher and all of these people. They used to criminalize people they deny people from going protesting against apartheid South Africa. When did Mandela dismantle his armed wing? After he came to power, not even after the fall of apartheid. Years later. So that he can ensure that everything is running smoothly before we give things up. That's why when you hear Israel and you hear like other countries supporting Israel, a demilitarized zone. They want a Palestinian state, but without weapons, but without this. Excuse me, what are you talking about? Oh yeah, we'll give you a state, but you can't have a military, you can't have police, you can't have access to water, and. So what is that exactly? What is that, a new type of state? They come up with these new definitions of state, right? And they'll always tell Hamas in Gaza, oh no, yeah, get rid of your weapons. Lebanon, we want to take our weapons. Take away our weapons. And you keep your weapons? If everyone's getting rid of their weapons, fine. Let's all get rid of our weapons. Great. Hey, we'll solve a lot of problems. But so long as you have weapons, you can't tell me not to have them. They're looking at them and they're laughing. And even when it comes to nuclear weapons, a country will have 6,000-7,000 warheads. Oh no, you're not allowed to have nuclear weapons. Why? You're not allowed. Well, why? Why do you have 7,000 warheads then? Do you not believe in the concept of nuclear weapons? No, I do, but for me, not for you. Hypocrisy, double standards, you know what I mean? And again, we have the capacity to reach a day where there's hopefully no wars, right? Reach things diplomatically, right? But greed has no boundaries. And people with greed, they'll kill for greed. They'll slaughter nations for greed. That's the reality of the world that we live in. Kate, thank you for your membership. You said no ceasefire next week. Unicorn. It doesn't look like we have a ceasefire next week. I personally think it's a joke. I personally think Netanyahu is buying time, and the United States is helping him buy time. The United States is talking about positive vibes. Oh hell, what do I care if you're feeling positive? Positive vibes. Who cares about the vibes? Show me what's happening. Has there been a breakthrough? Is someone going to sign something tomorrow? Did Israel agree to withdraw from all of the places and not wage war again? Did they or not? No, nothing happened. So don't tell me positive vibes. No, they'll tell you, we're feeling positive. Who cares? I don't care about how you feel. The people are suffering. They've been suffering for 10 months in Gaza. No water, no electricity, no food, no medical care, diseases, starvation. That's apart from the killing, of course, on top of all of that. People, when a building collapses in Gaza, it's the population, they start digging with their hands. There's no rescue teams in many places. Israel targets this, all deliberate, of course. It's part of their campaign. Mass destruction, right? Eileen, if you think the drone could have been a psyop drone, Bibi trying to show him that they know where he lives. Look, it could have been many things, but if anyone who hates Netanyahu reached a level of being able to send a drone to Benjamin Netanyahu's house, I think they would have put a camera on it. Because why send something without a camera? Hell, we'll put a camera, right? And I think it's a massive message. It is a very, very big message to Benjamin Netanyahu and to the security establishment. Because Hezbollah, not only that they sent many drones and they were not detected in Israel, recording, high quality recording, and with intel on the ground, this is the mind-boggling thing, is the fact that they have such high level of detail. Like, I analyzed that video that they published when they had their drone on top of the Ramat David base, if I'm not mistaken. It's called in the north, the biggest base in the north. They firstly revealed they were there twice. They published images of another date before that where they were there at night. Secondly, when they published the video during the day, they were telling you where the changing rooms are, almost, where this unit is, where they park the fighter jets, where they have their people sleeping, where they have hidden parking spaces, this room, that unit, who's the commander of the base. All of this knowledge, it's not like something flying over and that's it. No, they have info from the ground up. And when they sent it, they'll show you everything. So if they did that on Benjamin Netanyahu, that's a massive breach. Talking about the prime minister, and you're talking about a phase where they should be at their highest peak readiness, they said, peak readiness. Okay, if you're talking about peak readiness, how comes a drone comes next to your prime minister's house? That's number one. And again, it shows you again the level of sophistication from Hezbollah. Secondly, if you're in peak readiness, how comes every missile, most missiles from Hezbollah are landing? They're not even being intercepted. How? What is this readiness? Right? So it's a massive humiliation. Excuse me if I'm not pronouncing that name correctly, Wazlwentz, but thank you so much for your super thanks. That I was sad as many times since October, but there was one day that I cried with anger. Jordanian children cheering Iran's missiles 5 minutes afterwards with head on hand and desperate, understanding why their government shooting down the missiles. It was, that's Jordan for you. Listen, these countries, look, the Arab states, the Arab regimes in general, their role was the protectors of Israel. In many of these countries are led by people who graduated from Sandhurst Royal Military Academy in Britain. So these are the people who are teaching them. So what do you expect? Their inclination to be, who were they? Again, formation of post-World War II Sykes-Picot between the British and the French. The drawing of the maps, the actual people running the countries, families, or whatever. And they have to follow the rules, right? They have to follow the rules to a level where they will even defend a genocidal entity. This is the absurd thing. Under any excuse you want. Oh, we don't want anything on top of our people because it puts them at risk. What puts your population more at risk? To let something fly over it and land somewhere else, or you intercepting it on top of the heads of your own population? What kind of an excuse is that? What kind of an excuse is that? This was the excuse, that we are intercepting the Iranian missiles because we won't allow, anything from Iran nor from Israel here, and we wanted to protect the Jordanian people, causing fires and destruction in Jordan. It's like you have a criminal entity, you're already taking a shameful position with them. At least let someone punish them, right? No, they don't. They don't, and they will do whatever they can to save them, and will give you every excuse. You had an embargo that's working. From who? From one of the poorest countries, poor people getting out of a war that's being waged on them, supported by Saudi Arabia, and again the US and European countries, to starving them to death in Yemen. But they managed to impose a blockade on Israel, leading to economic collapse, bankruptcy in many places. And they will go and criticize them as well, right? They'll criticize them, they'll go and form a coalition against them. Well, how about you show us what you can do? If you were taking these actions that you should take, right, then, wouldn't necessarily do anything. Okay, let's see if we have anything else before we wrap up. Yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you so much to everyone who participated. And again, I'm sorry if I didn't reach all of them. I'll always miss something in the live, but thank you so much for your participation and comments. Much appreciated. Thank you to everyone who contributed. Thank you to everyone who sent supers. Much appreciated. Studio, Walid, Mingla, Samir, Gully, Golden, The Church, Chocolate Pudding, The Virus, and Walwents. Thank you all for your supers, much appreciated. I'll hopefully be with you tomorrow for another stream. I might have video as well. Like I said, I had 2 other videos posted earlier on. Go ahead and watch them, these shorter videos. But apart from that, thank you so much for tuning in again. I enjoyed my time with you. I hope you have as well, and I hope that I benefited you in something. Stay blessed, everyone, and I'll see you soon in the next live stream or video. Thank you so much, and peace, everyone. Salam.